18 on the Billboard single charts.
Number 22, and then number 22, and then from the PR, getting to number 22, went to number 18 in the Billboard charts. It meant that Christopher became the almost, now careful here, but recording artist, not somebody that wrote some music and all of a sudden, at 90 his music appears on the charts. He was 91 and a half years old when he recorded it, and he became the oldest performing artist to have ever charted. Every single music magazine in the world started to refer to him as a heavy metal star. So he started as somebody that wanted to sing, and at the end he was respected by every single heavy metal musician.
One of the founding members of Black Sabbath, Tony Iommi, presented me with the Metal Hammer Golden God Award.
I think it was probably the most memorable day that I can remember in the whole of my life. He was born again. He felt the energy of the place. I remember that we were in the changing rooms with Tony Iommi and Sir Christopher. They were talking. They had a very long conversation in the changing room. Sir Christopher said to him, you invented heavy metal. You are the father of metal. He said, and Tony Iommi replied, no. You were the one that created heavy metal. Your movies. I was inspired by your movies. So, Christopher, my movies, the good ones, I hope.
By 1998, I was 76 years old, and it could well have been assumed that my most fruitful years were behind me. But then, something happened. Something wonderful and quite unexpected happened. I received an invitation to tea at the Basil Street Hotel in Knightsbridge. My hosts there were the head of Islamic Studies from Cambridge University, Akbar, and his friend, the film director, Jamil Delavi. They had a question for me. What do you know about Jinnah? Well, I replied, I know that Muhammad Ali Jinnah was the Baba-e-Quam, or father of the nation of Pakistan, the state he founded in 1947 and became the first Governor-General of. It was his committed endeavor to create a separate state for Indian Muslims. I believe him to have been an extraordinary man of determination and brilliance. We should like you to play Jinnah, they replied. Jinnah was by far the most important film I made in terms of its subject and the great responsibility I had as an actor. I am immensely proud of this picture. I received really the best reviews I've ever had.
He was reminding you that he could do these memory parts, these more conventional dramatic roles, and he could bring nuance and subtlety and, statesmanship in that particular instance, playing Jinnah. He could bring all that to a role in a more conventional way. But you see, because he'd done so many short parts, I don't think casting directors very often saw him that way.
The film was a smash hit with the critics, but it barely saw the inside of a cinema. It seems many could not accept the notion of a white Englishman playing such an important Indian icon. It passed largely unseen. Had this been the coda to my career in film, well, it would have been a most satisfactory one. But Jinnah was not the end. It was the beginning of the end, and what an end it was to be. Almost a decade earlier, Vincent had enjoyed a magical last act revival. After a decade of films which were often beneath him, his final film, his final role, his final moment on the silver screen was a work of great beauty. Edward Scissorhands was an early picture from two of cinema's great artists, Tim Burton and Johnny Depp. It would be my good fortune to not only work with them, but to call them friends. Our first picture together was Sleepy Hollow, Washington Irving's tale of Ichabod Crane and the Headless Horseman. Their creepy but tongue-in-cheek Gothic style was, of course, familiar and pleasing to me, but unlike the Hammer films, there were no corners cut, and quality was paramount. I would go on to appear in 4 more Depp-Burton collaborations, and very fine they were too. I also found myself cast in what would go on to be the two biggest, go on to appear in 4 more Depp-Burton collaborations, and very fine they were too. I also found myself cast in what would go on to be the 2 biggest cinematic franchises in the entire world for the first decade of the new millennium. One of these was already the biggest franchise in film history. I would be following my friend Peter to become a villainous antagonist in a new Star Wars film under the creator himself, George Lucas. In the original Star Wars films in the 1970s, Lucas had redefined what could be achieved with special effects. But here, at the dawn of a new century, he was pioneering what could be achieved through digital manipulation of the image. To be working on the cutting edge of technology was a thrill, but it was also unfamiliar and disorienting. Forget the absence of other actors. Oftentimes, there weren't even sets. When one acts in nothing, to nothing, well, it was a challenge. But to be challenged is no bad thing. My high point in this trilogy was my duel with the iconic Yoda. A fight that didn't take place with a creature that didn't exist. George Lucas gave me a gift for which I remain eternally grateful. The generation of children who grew up on these movies have never even heard of Hammer films. He unshackled me from my past and allowed me to be something completely new to a modern audience. My resurrection was becoming a regeneration, and it was far from over. Suddenly, I was in demand. Stephen Polyakov wanted me for Glorious 39. Martin Scorsese hired me for his love letter to early cinema, Hugo. But the greatest gift was one which had come from New Zealand. My whole career, I had dreamt of appearing in just one film.
He knew that The Lord of the Rings was being produced, and he always wanted to play Gandalf. He read the books every year. He was very excited about that. So he said, well, look, find out on the internet, put the word out that I would like to be in that movie, Gandalf, Saruman, whatever, as long as he was in the movie.
Christopher was someone that we had in mind for Saruman, not just because of his background and because I had grown up, loving Christopher Lee's movies. He was perfect for that role, there's no doubt about it. You'd be hard-pressed to find another actor that would be better at bringing Saruman to life. What surprised us is that it wasn't just a conversation where we're trying to persuade him to do the role that we wanted for. He was super enthusiastic because he was a huge Tolkien fan. And then he said, well, I'd be very happy to do Saruman, of course, which is great. He says, but did you ever consider me for Gandalf? Which we hadn't done. And it put us on the spot a bit, because I said, really? He said, yes, I'd much prefer to play Gandalf. And it was like, and I understand why, because Gandalf was pushing him as an actor, whereas Saruman was something, everyone knows that he could do Saruman. He's perfect for that. So he said, I prepared a scene. Can you film me? I'd like to do Gandalf. I'd like to show you. He actually auditioned for us, which is the last thing we wanted Christopher Lee to do, audition for us for the role of Gandalf. He was good as Gandalf, but better as Saruman. And what we actually ended up realizing is that we had other possibilities for Gandalf. There were other actors that in different ways could do Gandalf, and we were talking to Ian, and he would be certainly top of the list. But there is no other actor we thought of that could do Saruman. I mean, Christopher was our only choice.
When he found out that he was going to be in the movie, it was like a dream come true to him. It was a geek. He was a Lord of the Rings geek. So that was a dream come true.
It was an incredibly demanding shoot, requiring 4 stints of shooting in New Zealand, early starts and long days.
I do remember his very first day of filming was interesting. It was a scene from Fellowship of the Ring where Saruman and Gandalf were walking in the Isengard garden just talking with each other. It's just the two of them. So we were in a local park in Wellington shooting that sequence. I remember partway through that first day, Ian came up to me just in between setups And he said, oh, you might need to have a word with Christopher. And I said, really? Why? He said, he's going great. And he said, Christopher's convinced that he's going to get fired at the end of the day. He's convinced he's doing a terrible job. He's convinced himself that you don't like it, and he's absolutely sure that he's going to get fired when the day's finished. Which was a terrible thing to hear when we're only halfway through the day. So I just, started to really reassure Christopher he was doing great. It was quite a surprising insecurity about him. For somebody who'd done 250 films, however many he'd done at that point, over decades of work, he was still a very nervous and insecure actor. It was almost like it was his first day on the set of any film ever. That's the way that he came across. So first two had met, and Christopher was great as Simon. Everyone loved the character, and everyone was looking forward to that third Lord of the Rings film. But we were struggling with the edit of it to really make the best film that we possibly could, and it was very, very long. I mean, our first cut of Return of the King was over 4 hours long, and it was just too long. And so something we had to condense it. When we had the sequences of him in the Return of the King, and we had to take time out, we looked at them and thought, well, this is really not advancing the storyline. It's like clearing up a loose end from the two towers, is how it felt a little bit, looking at it brutally. So a really tough decision was made that we could delete his appearance in The Return of the King, despite the fact we'd already shot it.
Chris was terribly upset about it. I remember saying to him at the time, hello, your essential role in Lord of the Rings, now you're part of Star Wars. Relax.
He was thrilled to be in all of the new popular movies that were popular with, the movies that he was always in popular movies. Even the Hammer films were popular pictures, but they weren't mainstream popular, like blockbuster popular. And when you get into working with George Lucas and working with Peter Jackson, now you're talking about these are huge budget movies that are seen by millions of people the world over, and it's the top of the heap. You really can't get much higher than that. And I think he was really thrilled at that point in his career to say that, okay, I did this. I went from here. I went from tiny parts in swashbuckler movies in the early 50s to, the top of the heap and playing with the most respected directors, Scorsese included, in the world.
He was very aware that these were big-name directors, but he seemed to forget that he was a big-name actor. Or at any rate, he had a huge heritage stretching back several decades, which is why they wanted it. But it did constitute an Indian summer.
The Lord of the Rings, quite rightly, won many awards. And then I started to as well. I realized that there comes a point at which they give you awards merely for still being alive. I was very moved and grateful for all of them, but there is a none too coded message attached to every Lifetime Achievement Award, which suggests that one might no longer be considered the promising newcomer, and that one's potential might now be spent. The old Pipe and Slivers Award.
The knighthood meant a lot to him. He was a little disappointed